your host.
Well, hooray, we've made it back from the break. This is David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com, and this is the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe. Well, you don't have to subscribe to the archives, but do maybe get yourself some merch, which is really cool, because then, you can get a Revolution Radio hoodie or t-shirts and mugs and things. They're really cool. And that's a way of supporting the station, because a small part of that purchase is, profit, and that goes towards the station's running. So do that and do make a difference. And if you listen to a show and they have a call-in number, do call it in. Do call in and say hello. Don't just listen. Listening's good. But and don't always expect the host to repeat your opinion back at you. That's not the best way to go. That's called confirmation bias. And you do need to hear conflicting opinions so you can solidify yours. That's extremely important when it comes to being a well-rounded individual who's able to make their own choices, because then you get to make a choice about, given all the appropriate information, of which way you would like to go. Become educated. And this is the beginning of the second hour of show number 542, 240, and 500. Would say Mecky if he were on the call. I got an update a bit in a second. And today's topic is false flags. And we're going to go through that in a second. Now, during the break, I managed to speak with Becky, and his Skype wasn't opening at all. And he might be able to join us shortly if he can log in and get that working. Otherwise, he'll resort to his electric telephone and maybe some Skype on the phone. We don't know. So fingers crossed. His home PC, which is a Mac, just up and died on him recently, and hopefully he can do this on a laptop. If he can, he will join us. He promises. He's doing everything he can to join. Anyway, in the meantime, I'm going to thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, and specifically David Mackey's Shiny Side Out. If you're watching or listening to this on YouTube, thank you very much. Mecky and I also have a Patreon. We also have a website to visit, and we do ask that you go and visit our website. Simply type in Shiny and a space, side and a space, out, and it should be the top link. You can go and find us that way, and in that way you can communicate with us. We have emails there. You can email us through a page. We don't reveal the email, I don't think, in that, or it might be hidden in the page, I'm not sure. Do that anyway. Get in contact with us, and that's how we get most of our hate mail. And we do thank everyone for sending through their opinion, whether or not we agree with it. We're happy to read through it. And if you have a question, we'll answer it as well in the email, or we'll bring it up in a show. If you have a suggestion for a show topic, and be nice, be respectful, then do let us know, because we're currently researching a plethora of stuff that we can't talk about until we get the full picture. And if there's enough to reveal something, like when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle and you know there's a picture of a horse on the jigsaw, but you've only got it like 1 foot and it doesn't kind of look like anything. Well, that's kind of what research is. And sometimes you don't get the full picture until you get a lot more info. And that's because it could just look like a skyscape or a landscape, with some mountains, but you don't realize there's a creature in the middle staring at you until you get that full picture. That's where we're currently at. This is False Flags Part 1. Now, number 1, this episode, this False Flags has been updated from the other two times that it's been, or the other time, sorry, that it's been on air, and that was on show number 70. But this time, it's been massively updated by Meki, and this was like part of that jigsaw. So originally we only had a few pieces, now we have a lot more. The first comment here, sadly Meki isn't with us yet, but never believed.
Hello.
Oh, you're there.
I'm
Hello.
here. Hey. I'm on my
Hello.
phone because Skype is not working on my laptop.
All right. So if we could somehow increase the volume of your speaking, and your video is on, by the way.
Yes, let me turn it off, my friend.
There we go. I can see you. Hello, Meki.
Hello.
And the video. There we go. Right, you've done perfectly. Now,
can you hear me now?
We can get, try. Let's do one last audio.
Okay, here I am. Can you hear me? Okay.
That's better volume.
Okay, that's the phone. All right, next to my mouth.
Okay, good. Let's keep it at that distance. All right. So I'm not sure. Do you have the show notes available to you?
Yeah, I got everything.
Okay.
Just a quick preamble. The reason we're doing false flags is actually something else planned for the next short cycle, but because of recent events, and we do try to stay current and be relevant for things that are happening right now, we found it incumbent upon ourselves to talk about false flags. Now, why is this? Number one, everybody's talking about the Ukrainian false flags, and we'll deal with that as well. We'll talk about that. But also, Alex Jones has just the judgment against him to the tune of $60-something million.
Yeah, that's right.
Where he called the Sandy Hook shooting a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I agree with that. It's not a hoax. It absolutely happened. It's a horrendous thing. And Dave and I discussed this, right? So there's a lot of people out there in the world now, and it's really interesting because they're part of our community, or some of them anyway. They say that all of these events are just hoaxes, crisis actors, this, that, and the other. So let's be very clear here, right? Both. Well, I don't want to speak for you, Dave, but certainly you can give me your opinion once I've laid out my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these school shootings and other attacks are absolutely real. People are suffering. People get killed. People are hurt. And it's a horrendous thing. I would never dream to say that these are not actual events. What they are, though, is, in my opinion, not all of them, but a number of them are false flag events. Now, there's a big difference between a hoax and a false flag event. A false flag event, we'll talk about the history in a second as well. It's essentially an act that's committed by a party you would think is benevolent on your side, right? Not kind of like friendly fire, but not really. Friendly fire is usually an accident. False flag events are meticulously planned and executed to blame someone else. Okay, so I want to be very clear here. I think that the parasitic class, right, the parasites, they do undertake these horrendous acts of terror, these shootings and other things, bombings. I mean, it's a whole bunch of stuff they do, right? In order to fill us with fear and uncertainty, as we've discussed, but ultimately to further their agenda. And the key thing for them is, of course, to stay in power, to maintain a status quo. So, but they do that under the guise of false flags. So they blame somebody else for it, be it another nation player, be it another non-nation external force or an internal force that is being blamed. It doesn't really matter if it's the lone shooter or some kind of domestic terrorism organization or a foreign domestic terrorism organization or a foreign political entity, foreign nation. It doesn't matter as long as the blame doesn't fall on them. And now I fear that all of these talks that are verifiably false flags, all these talks about hoaxes and whatnot, will reflect on all of the actual false flag events that we do know about, that actually happen in history and that we suspect are real, right?
And we have a bunch of those as examples coming up. Yeah.
Oh, completely. No, we know undeniably there are false flags in history. We're going to go through those in some detail. There are others that we suspect are false flags, but we do not believe they are hoaxes. I want to be very, very clear. Mm-hmm. We do not believe that these attacks on not just Americans, but on pretty much anyone really out there in the world are not hoaxes. They're not crisis actor events. Maybe they happen. I have no hard evidence for that, but I do have evidence for it, that people are dying as part of
Yes.
the parasitic classes attack on us. Now, Dave, what do you think?
Pardon me. Now, that wasn't intentional. Okay, so I agree with your statements 100%, and I agree with you about um, that you shouldn't call something a hoax or occupied by crisis actors unless you actually have real substantial proof and can prove
Yeah.
it, and you're not going to end up as an Alex Jones, right? So calling it that is not good enough, because remember, people have called out that Australia isn't real and that we're just crisis actors. While it's a preposterous notion to say that Australia doesn't exist because I'm living in it, I'm here, I have an Australian accent, g'day mate, right? I don't understand how someone could do that in all reality.
Yeah.
Sure, I joke about the Californians that I went to school with who just quietly and I suppose not with true heartfelt belief. They don't believe it's true, but they said it anyway because it's kind of a joke that the rest of the US was a foreign country. It's not real what they're saying. They're not saying that that's the way it is, but that's what they kind of joked about. And I think it's really funny. This is back in the 80s. So, places change. The thing that we're calling out here is that number one, be careful what you call out. Number two, yes, these things exist, and we've got a ton of examples that show that that's what they are, and we know that they are, and there's still some iffy ones which we should always continue investigation in, because it's quite possible they are. Number three, look out for them in the future. Look out for things that appear as though they might be, and do your research, and don't let up. Research it, because you got to say the Bay of Tonkin, Becky, which I'm just going to give a little quote here,
Sure.
was denied by everybody initially.
Yeah.
Right. And then only 20, 30, 40 years later was it confessed to have been a false flag, and everyone went, oh yeah, I thought so, right? And then it doesn't, it's not just back that far. We've got World War II, the beginning of that. We'll touch on each of these. Mickey, I just want to start with, never believe anything in politics until it has been officially denied. I love that quote. Who is that?
I know. No, that was actually Otto von Bismarck. Now, Otto von Bismarck lived 150 years ago, right? So it's quite a while now. But he was a conservative German statesman. He was actually German chancellor, I think, or minister president, and it was still under the monarchy back then. And he was responsible, in fact, for the unification of Germany in 1871. Prior to 1871, there had been many German countries: Bavaria, Hesse, Saxony. I mean, a whole bunch, right? I mean, literally, I think 50 or so entities that were German. But it was Otto von Bismarck who managed to unify them in 1871 and create what we have now come to know as Germany, more or less. I mean, the borders were somewhat different, but what you see today is Germany is what he created back then. So a very accomplished statesman, a realist, and he said that diplomacy doesn't win wars, blood and iron does. That's what he said.
Nice.
But this
really
one,
World War One-ish, isn't it?
I know, right? Oh, by the way, I've changed platforms. I'm now on Skype on internet Skype, so in my browser. So this hopefully is a little bit better.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm off my phone. But look, this is. I mean, this is a quote that was put out there 150 years ago, right? So Never believe anything in politics until it's been officially denied. That's exactly where we are. I mean, look at the world. No, that's not. I mean, you can even, if you wanted, you can stretch it to to UAPs. You can stretch it into anything that our little conspiratorial world encompasses. You can stretch to, but not just there. Anything really.
Even the current New South Wales Premier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's nuts.
This week, just for everyone here, he had previously in the weeks before, when questioned about one of his own ministers' activities and his assignment as to America is with $500,000 a year job. The selection process was not followed with official processes, and it was labelled in the media here as jobs for the boys, where he was just kind of given a cushy role, and he quit, in the week before it, the rules were changed to allow it to occur, right? In the week before he quit, and then he quit, and then he was assigned this role. But then there was a person who had been found to be better for the role, and was said to have gotten the role, but only internally. And then there was like, hang on a minute, and that was in that week leading up to who could and couldn't participate in the application of the role. Only then, after the rule was changed, was it given to him, to this minister. And all the way through that, the Premier, which is like the head of the state of New South Wales, denied everything. Absolutely denied everything. Don't know anything about it. No, all of it, so it's all good. And then when all the emails came out, it's like, well, did you know about it? Yeah, yes. And then he did a big gulp, Becky, live to air, when he was being asked the hard question. When did you know? No, so when did you commence lying to us? Or something like that. Direct question as a follow-up. And I just gone, yes, please answer this. And he gulped like a child gulps when you've caught with their hand in a cookie jar. And no other excuse. Oh, I was just trying to straighten up the cookies. No, you weren't. You were trying to eat one, right?
Yeah.
When did you start lying? When did you start lying to me?
No, it was in flagranti delicto, which means you were caught, like Dave said, with your with your hand in the cookie jar, in the cookie jar.
Yeah. But anyway, when he did that, it was clear that he looked like a frightened child being questioned by the parents and being found out. Which is, I'm only saying what he is, and it's not alleged. All of this is alleged. So disappointingly, yes, he denied it all the way through. And there you go. Never believe anything in politics then until it has been officially denied. And he denied everything.
And look, it's the go-to strategy for politicians, right? If you can't get away with it, deny it. Right? If you're being fun, no, that never happened. It's like, in fact, Watergate. I'm not a crook. Yeah. Good for you, I say. No, I never had sexual relations with that woman. Right.
What about UFOs? Do UFOs exist? No, they did not.
No.
What? Are you what? I don't know what they are.
No, I don't know.
What about UAPs? Well, we don't have access to anything historically.
Well,
that's the funniest statement I've ever heard.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But look, but the point is that when these false flags or black flags happen, right? Obviously, I mean, the reason there are false flag operations at all is so you can deny it, right? I mean, it's the whole point of it. You blame somebody else, as we outlined in the introduction. We blame somebody else. Oh no, it wasn't us. Somebody else did this. Oh my goodness, somebody else. And it's really great. And when we go through the history of it, which we will in a moment, and over the next couple of weeks, you will see just how convenient a tool, I want to call it, this really is. I mean, let's say you're stuck, a politician or your regime or junta or whatever, dictator.
Junta.
A junta, right? And there's certain things you want to do, but you can't because you don't get it by. Nobody is by. Like, okay, World War II. Americans didn't really want to go into World War II. There was no public sentiment that we should go and join World War II, right? The public opinion, nay,
It's not our
Nay,
war.
any,
It's not our
no
war.
war. Not our war. So how do we get them in? How do we get them in? Now, I don't want to take anything away from future episodes of this particular show cycle, but well, let's. Oh, what if we were attacked?
Oh, that would be enough.
Huh?
Yeah,
That's a good
that'd
one,
be good.
right? Because we're not aggressive here. We're just defending ourselves, right? And look,
That's
we'll
right.
talk about that when we get to it. But of course, in order to get public opinion
Yeah.
to move, and the Germans did the same thing back in the day, you need to have an event that occurs, and ideally you're in control of the event, so you can control the damage it causes, and you can control the narrative, and then you get what you want. And this is the key thing here, Dave, and everybody out there. The key thing when you look at things like false or black flags or whatever you want to call them, it is important to understand, and you really have to do your research here, who benefits, right? So if nobody benefits,
that's the magic. That's the magic of determining whether it is or isn't.
Yeah, the chances are it's just a thing that happened. So if you can't see anyone, or a large group of people benefiting from an event, then the event is probably just something that happened, right? But if you see a large group, especially people that are linked through interest or history or whatever it might be, in an event's outcome, and you see that that the outcome is beneficial to a whole
Silverstein
raft of people.
What?
I love
Who
the
said that?
A lot. I love the leader. I don't know.
I love the leader too. There must be a cross line.
Cross line. No, but so yeah, look for not when I say profit motive, I'm not just talking about money, but look who benefits. I mean, simple example, right? I won't name the event, but in relatively recent history, there was an event that
was rather
happened.
Large, was it?
Yeah, it brought about the creation of a new government agency, biggest since the FBI in America. It brought about a raft of legislation, both in America and overseas. It also started a 20-year war in several theaters of operation against an abstract term.
Okay? That's right, because you're fighting an ideal.
You're fighting, a word. It's a word. We're fighting a word now. We're fighting words, and notions. We're in the business of going to war with notions now.
Oh, very nice.
But the
what
point
a world
is,
we live in.
What a world we live in, and so that's just on a really large scale. But on the finer tooth scale, a documentation that was irksome for some was destroyed. People cleaned up. Both in the stock market and in insurance, payouts that is, and it led to a wave of almost unprecedented positive sentiment for the United States, which of course was fairly quickly squandered. But
of course,
nonetheless,
like a lotto win. Yep.
Yeah, but my point here is, and this is why I maintain that was a false flag operation. That's my opinion. But again, people have different opinions. That's not good. Because of the people and groups and so forth that actually benefited from it. But Dave,
beneficiaries. Yes. Let me describe false flag. All right, you could call it a black flag too, and you'll know why that is the case in a second. The term false flag goes back at least to the age of piracy. Arr! When pirate ships would fly a deceptive flag, or maybe of a friendly or neutral state, to lure their prey within striking distance, usually their cannons, before running up the Jolly Roger and attacking. Arr! Arr! Yeah, those are the days. In modern usage, the false flag operation is a deliberately planned ruse to make it seem like a state has been attacked, thereby justifying the retaliatory military operations against the purported offender. False flag covert military or paramilitary operations are designed to deceive in such a way that the operations appear as though they were being carried out by other entities, groups maybe, or even nations, than those who actually planned and executed them. Operations carried during peacetime by civilian organizations as well as covert government agencies may by extension be called false flag operations if they seek to hide the real organization behind the operation. The name false flag has its origins in naval warfare, where the use of a flag other than the belligerents, is that right? Yep. A true battle flag as a ruse de guerre. Is that right? No.
Ruse de guerre. It's ruse de guerre. It's French. Yeah, it's just
ruse de guerre.
War tactic.
Yeah, war tactic or trick. Before engaging the enemy has long been acceptable. Just think about that.
Yep.
It's been acceptable to deceive the enemy by pretending either to be neutral or being one of them and then attacking them. Such operations are also acceptable in certain circumstances in land warfare to deceive enemies in similar ways, providing that the deception is not perfidious and all such deceptions are discarded before opening fire upon the enemy. What? What a gentleman's war this used to be.
We'll sneak up. They think we are them, and then when we can see the white in their eyes,
we'll tear off their uniforms that we're wearing, and then shoot upon their person.
Yeah, fret not, fret not.
Then we'll smite. Is it smite? Spate? No, smite. Smite.
Smote. He has been smitten. I smite thee, mighty smiter. No, look, Dave is 100% correct.
That's
so look,
crazy.
It is. So let's be very clear here, right? This is important to understand. False flag operations are in fact a reality. Let's tick in the box to understand. Okay, so they do happen. They happen. Okay, and this is really where conspiracy theory you can give a really negative connotation to, right? Mm-hmm. It's all the crazy people talk about that, but a false flag operation, and especially because certain people are now accusing the Russians of doing it, you can't do the same thing too, because it's a real thing. None of false flags are real, except ours aren't, theirs are. So we never do this, but they do it, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
let's be clear here.
Yeah, goody two shoes over there. That's right.
Yeah, and we will see this in just a moment, but everybody does it. I don't know if we're going to get a chance. We've got another half hour, maybe we can, but there are many famous historical false flag events. I significantly updated the list. But let's look at the truth about false flags from Nazi Germany to the Vietnam War as a preamble. Then we'll go into a bit more detail into some of those. And on the night of 31st of August 1939, it's almost the anniversary of that event, several covert Nazi operatives dressed as Polish soldiers stormed the Gleiwitz radio tower on the Germany-Poland border. Right. So this is the eve of the beginning of World War II. Mm-hmm. They broadcast a short anti-German message in Polish before leaving. The soldiers left behind the bodies of a pro-Polish German farmer and several unidentifiable Dachau concentration camp prisoners. The farmer and the prisoners had been murdered and dressed up in German uniforms. The attack was part of a series of covert actions along the Polish border that the Nazis would use to justify Germany's attack on Poland on the following day. Gleiwitz, as we now know, was a classic false flag operation. And you can't deny it. It happened. There it is. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, and then, over time, the term false flag came to be applied to any covert operation that sought to shift the responsibility to a different party, as was the case with Nazi Gleiwitz. One of the most famous incidents, and considered by many to be a false flag operation, was the Reichstagsfeier. That was the German parliament.
Yes.
Which took place on the night of the 27th of February 1933. 6 short years before the outbreak.
What was the German name for that?
Reichstagsband. Reichstagsband. That's what it was. A lone communist, this is always the thing. Whenever you hear this lone gunman or a lone. Sure. Alone anything, right? Yeah. I love this the spin-off series from the X-Files, the Lone Gunmen. Mm-hmm. Plural, yes. Anyway, a lone communist sympathizer called Marius van der Lubbe, it's actually Dutch, was arrested and charged with setting fire to the German parliament building. This gave Hitler and his propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels the excuse they needed to purge Germany of opposition, especially the communists. And again, the communists, yeah, they were the first in the camp, right? The sweeping emergency powers Hitler and the Nazi Party grabbed for themselves after the fire are the reason many people think that Reichstag was burned not by a lone communist protesting Germany's treatment of the working classes, as van der Lubbe himself claimed while in custody, but by the Nazis themselves. So Lubbe denied having set fire.
Yeah.
Now, does this, okay, so just before we go on, sorry, does this sound like anything that happened recently? I mean, really? Come on.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the United States and Great Britain jointly organized false flag operations during the 1953 Iranian coup. Of course, it isn't just the Nazis who stand accused of carrying out false flag operations prior to invasions during the 1930s. In November 1939, the Russian village of Mainila was shelled by an unknown party. The village was close to the border with Finland, and the attack was used as an excuse to break the Soviet Union's non-aggression pact with the country and launch an invasion into Finland, something the Finns are fearing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that event would later become known as the Winter War. It was eventually concluded by both British and Russian historians that the shelling of the village was a false flag operation carried out by members of the NKVD, which is the predecessor organization of the KGB. As a result of the war between the Soviets and the Finns, Finland decided with Nazi Germany in World War II. False flag operations carried on through the war, but most can be considered to be in the old sense of the word. One of the most famous false flag operations of World War II was the raid on the French dry dock of Saint-Nazaire. There, British commandos managed to float an explosives-laden old Royal Navy destroyer fitted out to look like a German torpedo boat close enough to the harbor to destroy all key structures in the port upon the destroyer's detonation, right?
I do like the secret projects that have a success.
I know.
I don't care what side they're on.
Yeah, well, what happened after the war, my friend?
Well, the United States and Great Britain jointly organized a false flag operation during the 1953 Iranian coup. The aim of the operations carried out in the country was to deliberately undermine the government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh had made the mistake of nationalizing Iran's oil companies. This angered the US and the UK, who jointly decided to launch a series of bombing campaigns against mosques and prominent people that they then blamed on communists sympathetic to the government. Protests grew against the leader, egged on by the CIA and MI6, and Mossadegh was eventually fired from his post by the Shah of Iran and placed under house arrest. He would stay there until his death in 1967. That's the year I was born.
Mm-hmm.
The US refused to admit any involvement in the overthrow of Mossadegh until 2013, where they finally admitted it. Wow. While questions still hang over the Reichstag fire, one planned operation from the early 1960s would definitely have been a false flag had it not been stopped in its tracks. Operation Northwoods, I hope everyone is familiar with that term, was the name given to a proposed covert campaign by the CIA that would have seen acts of terrorism committed against targets and civilians in the United States that could then be blamed on Cuban operatives as a precursor to an invasion of Cuba and the removal of Fidel Castro. Northwoods was proposed to then US President John F. Kennedy, but he ultimately rejected the idea. And remember, that was while he was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember that. While Northwoods may have been shelved, the American false flag operation definitely did take place in the 60s. On August the 2nd, 1964, the destroyer USS Maddox was torpedoed and fired upon by 3 Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin in the South China Sea. The US's National Security Agency then fabricated a second false flag attack 2 days later, and the US subsequently passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution through the Congress, which led to the deployment of ground troops in what would become the calamitous debacle that was the Vietnam War. Too many online conspiracy theorists, the biggest false flag, sorry, not too many online conspiracy theorists, the biggest false flag operation of all time was the 9/11 attacks. Of course, it isn't just the Americans and the Europeans who have been accused of participating in false flag operations over the years. Between 1979 and 1983, the Israeli Secret Services stand accused of instigating a series of car bomb attacks in Lebanon that killed hundreds of Lebanese and Palestinians. Though the bombings were claimed by the terrorist organization, the Front for the Liberation of Lebanon from Foreigners, many believe the bombs were set off by the Israelis to sow dissent through the region and justify an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Though an Israeli general has admitted the attacks were carried out by his country, the official line is still that Israel was not involved. Becky.
And in the modern era, or like in more recent times, things have become a little murkier. Whether a modern day false flag operation is real or not is now a matter to be bitterly fought over on the internet. To many online conspiracy theorists, the biggest false flag operation of all time was 9/11, or the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, as Dave outlined a little earlier. Many believe that these attacks were deliberately carried out by the US government as a way to justify the subsequent attacks on Afghanistan and Iraq, which they believe were carried out to install a gas pipeline across Afghanistan and to seize the oil wealth of Iraq. Now, before going on here, so let's be very clear. It wasn't just that. So it wasn't just the gas pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things. There are many other things. The opium or poppy production, the Taliban.
Also the natural history.
Oh, completely.
Of the Sumerians.
Which
were at
completely.
threat and used as leverage. Why would anyone care about that unless it was valuable?
Well, correct. Now, so this is a fairly significant oversimplification. And then look, maybe we have to do another show on 9/11 at some point, just because it's been such a long time now, people forget, right? Anyway, let's carry on. Many 9/11 truthers point out discrepancies in the official report into the destruction of the World Trade Center, focusing primarily on the collapse of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Tower, or building number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7 is probably the smoking gun, if you want to call it that. They argue that the towers could not have been brought down by plane strike and fire alone, but must have instead been brought down by another means, such as by maybe controlled demolition. The claims that 9/11 was an inside job have been vigorously disputed both by the US government and various experts many times, but it is highly unlikely the myriad of conspiracy theories swirling around 9/11 will ever go away. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely true. Now, we now live in an age where, to some at least, nothing is as it seems. And I'm one of those where, you've got the official story, which is the shadows on the wall. And everything can be labeled a conspiracy, and no amount of evidence to the contrary will change people's minds. Now, you have to look at the evidence both for and against to form an opinion. If you only look at one-sided evidence, then it's not debate, it's pointless. So, if something is not a conspiracy to harm the people, because let's be very clear, we're talking about conspiracies that are meant to harm the people, okay? And conspiracies exist. Full stop. If they didn't, the word wouldn't exist. What we are dealing with here, especially on the shiny side out, are conspiracies designed to serve the parasitic class and to harm, well, most of us, really. That's really the point here, right? And those are the conspiracies we are focusing on. I don't really care about anything else, it doesn't really bother me too much either way. Now, There have been several documented false flag operations throughout history, and the existence of them goes some way to explaining why thousands upon thousands of people all around the world believe many more covert operations have been carried out, regardless of government claims to the contrary. But that's the whole point. Right now, again, we're sharing an article here with you, obviously. But I mean, the whole point is that the government will deny it. Of course, that's the whole point of a false flag operation. I mean, it's a tautology to then bring it forward as a claim that, you know, no, it can't be false flag. It can't be conspiracy because we say it's not. Sorry, Dave. Maybe I didn't understand. Clearly, you what? Now, one thing is for sure, though. The false flag operation has come a long way since the days of piracy and pirates flying false colors to get their hands on the lovely booty.
That's correct. Famous historical false flag events. The most commonly known false flag operations consist of a government agency staging a terror attack, whereby an uninvolved entity gets blamed for the carnage. As at least 2 millennia have proven, false flag operations with healthy doses of propaganda and ignorance provided a great recipe for endless war. In War is a Racket, 2-time Medal of Honor recipient Major General Smedley Butler wrote, and there's a rather long quote here, and I'll read it all in one go. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. Think about how old that is. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in, well, this is a range of 10 years from 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. And in 1927, in China, I helped to see that its Standard Oil went on its way unmolested.
So to be very clear, this is actually where we get the term Banana Republic from. The work that General Smedley Butler did, Major General, sorry, because the Banana Republic was essentially any kind of government within, especially South America, that had lost all power, but was just a puppet dictatorship for American corporate and commercial interests, not for the American government. Let's be very clear here, right? So the American government might have sent the troops, but they did so not as part of a national security policy or a national defense policy, but as a national economic policy to further the aims of the rich capitalists, if you want to call them that, in America. That's what it was. I mean, these guys, and it used to be mostly guys, were so interconnected. They went to all the same fraternities, all the same secret societies. They had generational wealth. You know, they knew each other, and they planned how to pillage and rape the rest of the world. I mean, they weren't any different to the British Empire in that way, but they were more efficient at it. And they put the entire military apparatus of the United States to that particular use. By the way, it started, Dave, you might find this interesting, after the end of the banking wars, which had taken place in the 19th century in the United States. If you don't know what the banking wars are, I'll tell you what, we'll do a show on it, but look it up for yourselves. Essentially, it was the attempt for the privately owned banks to gain control of the American currency. That's really what it was about. A war which was eventually lost by the likes of Thomas Jefferson and others, who were extremely vocal and strong in their opposition to that development. But it only happened after that banking war was won, in fact, by the banks. Which brings us to more specific examples. And the first example here goes back 2,000 years, believe it or not, right? It's Nero, Christians, and the Great Fire of Rome. Now I'm sure there were other false flag attacks in the past, but this is the first one we have, some serious evidence and testimony about. Rome, the night of July 1964 of our current reckoning of time, so the year 64. The Great Fire burst through the rooftops of shops near the mass entertainment and chariot racing venue called Circus Maximus. The flames, whipped by a strong wind, rapidly engulfed densely populated areas of the city. After burning uncontrolled for 5 days, 4 of the 14 Roman districts were burned to the ground, and 7 more were severely damaged. So that's quite significant destruction there. It was no secret that Nero wanted to build a series of palaces, which he planned to name Neropolis. Daveopolis. Yes, nice.
Nice.
But the plan, to it. Right? But the planned location was in the city, and in order to build Neropolis, a third of Rome would have to be torn down. You can't do that. Now, this puts me in mind of 9/11. I'm sorry, but it really does. The thing is, they had to, there was asbestos in the 2 towers. Sorry to that.
That's right, there was, and they couldn't be demolished.
Well, it could have, but it would have cost a bomb.
Oh yeah,
it would have cost a
big
bomb.
Price tag on that.
So, how much better would it be to just have some terrorists fly planes into them? How good is that?
Well, just have the asbestos, spread across the city.
Yeah, and rather than having it cost me anything, I'll collect some insurance money. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it'll pay for itself.
Yeah, so sorry. Now, the Senate, of course, rejected the idea. Then, coincidentally, the fire cleared the very real estate Neropolis required. Despite the obvious benefit, there's still a good probability that Nero did not start the fire. Accounts of the day say that when Nero heard about the fire, he rushed back from Antium, which is the city, anyway, it doesn't matter, to organize a relief effort. Of course he would, using his own money. Well, why not? He's getting his wish now. He opened his palaces to let in the homeless and had food supplies delivered to the survivors. And look, once you've got what you needed, of course you can be generous.
Wage, Mickey.
Yeah, it's all good, right? People knew of Nero's plans for Neropolis, and all his efforts to help the city could not counteract the rampant rumors that he had helped start the fire. Nero's administration realized the need to employ false flag 101. When anything bad happens to you, even if it's accidental, point the finger at your enemy. Luckily, there was a new cult of religious nuts at hand. The cult was unpopular because its followers refused to worship the emperor, denounced possessions, held secret meetings, and they were always talking about the destruction of Rome and the end of the world. Even more luckily for Nero, 2 of the cult's biggest leaders, Peter and Paul, Peter, Paul, and Mary, were currently in town. Nero spread the word that the Christians had started the Great Fire. The citizens of Rome bought his lie, hook, line, and sinker. Hundreds were fed to the lions or smeared with tar and set on fire to become human street lamps. Yes, that actually happened.
Wow. Yes. Oh. Remember, always blame the enemy. That's right.
Oh yeah.
I like in the recent conflict in Ukraine and Russia, one of their ammo dumps blew up for some reason. No one saw anything, but it still blew up. And they went, "Oh no, someone else blew it up." It was the Ukrainians blew it up. Did they? Did they really? I mean, it was 20 kilometers inland from the battlefront. So I really don't think they did that. But it wasn't your poor storage or weapons handling regime, was it? Maybe. But blame them anyway. Yeah, it gets more people inside. All right, number 2. Remember the Maine with an E at the end. To hell with Spain. The Spanish Empire was the first truly global empire, reaching its in the modern era, reaching its territorial height in the late 1700s. By 1898, Spain was losing territories regularly. Cuba, too, was becoming increasingly hard to control, and a minor revolution had broken out. This wasn't welcome news to the people in the United States who owned Cuban sugar, which we mentioned earlier. Also tobacco and the iron industries, properties valued at over 50 million, worth equivalent of 1.2 billion today. The mainstream media, then dominated by newspaper magnates Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, exaggerated and outright fabricated stories of horrible conditions under Spanish rule. Following the old age maxim, if it bleeds, it leads, the newspapers published stories about Spanish death camps, Spanish cannibalism, and inhumane torture. The newspapers sent reporters to Cuba. However, when they got there, they found a different story. Artist and correspondent Frederick Remington wrote back to Hearst, "There is no war. Request to be recalled." Hearst's famous reply, "Please remain. You furnish the pictures. I'll furnish the war." And he did. His newspaper continually screaming how Spanish Cuba was going to hell in a handbasket, convinced big business interests in the US to put pressure on the anti-war President William McKinley to protect their Cuban investments. McKinley, in response, sent the USS Maine battleship to Havana Harbor as a calming show of force. 3 weeks after arriving, on the night of February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine exploded, killing 266 men. There were two theories for the explosion. Some believe the explosion was caused by an external mine that detonated the ship's ammunition magazines. Others say it was caused by a spontaneous coal bunker fire that reached the ammunition magazines. Currently, evidence seems to favor the external mine theory. Without waiting on an investigation, America's mainstream media blamed the tragedy on Spain and beat the drums of war. By April, McKinley yielded to public pressure and signed a congressional resolution declaring war on Spain. To help pay for the Spanish-American War, Congress enacted a temporary tax of 3% on long-distance telephone bills. Good grief, really? This was essentially a tax on the rich, as only about 1,300 Americans owned phones back in 1898. Although Spanish-American War ended in 1898, still the same year, the temporary tax was only abolished in 2005.
Once the tax is there,
always
it's not going away. That's right.
There's something left on this parchment. It says we all get a pig each. It's over its lifetime, the 107-year-old war generated almost 94 billion, more than 230 times the cost of the Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War put a large nail in the coffin of Spain's global empire, and by the end of 1898, the United States, which was founded in opposition to imperialism, found itself in control not only of Cuba, but of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Hawaiian Islands as well.
That's right. Now we don't have a lot of time. Yeah, I don't think we'll make it. So the next bit of information we're going to share with you is the Manchurian incident. We don't have time for that because we want to do it justice and not just rush it through. But look, suffice it to say, I think, Dave, the evidence for false flag operations as a tool of war, as a tool of politics and diplomacy, I think is undeniable. And look, we're going to go into more detail over the next 2 weeks. Yeah, but I mean, it is right,
Yeah.
and it is something that is being used whenever necessary. Now, only in recent times do we deny. I mean, no one really would say, "Look, yeah, okay, yes, sure, it never happened." Nobody would say that. They'll say, "Yeah, it happened in the past." Clearly when people were, less educated and less civilized.
2,000 years ago.
But
yeah,
but today, no, Mackie,
not
not
so
today. I mean, the government would never do that, right? They only have our best interest at heart. Now,
they have their best interests at heart. That's
if you've been, yeah, exactly. If you've been living under a rock for the last 100 years, or actually,
it's been a little uncomfortable, but yeah, sure, why not?
You can put it. I mean, make it the last 10,000 years. Doesn't really matter. And you would have noticed that the government or the governments of the world don't. I think as a rule, never really. Oh, that's the music. They never really act in the interest of the people. That's the music.
Hey, this is Dave Mackey's Shiny Side Out, episode 542, winding up for today. Coming up next is Jer Bear's awesome show, After Hours. He plays some really cool tunes and, he talks about a whole bunch of things. So, join them and see Mickey and I, or join us at Tuesday and Thursday with Plato's Take this week. Until then, take care.